really wrote the Quran? Muslims believe it to be the literal word of God, delivered to the Prophet Muhammad by the angel Gabriel over 23 years. But secular historians and scholars, using critical methods, offer very different theories. From literary analysis to archaeological discoveries, the Quran's authorship remains one of the most debated topics in religious history. Let's dive into what history, linguistics, and comparative religion really have to say about the origins of Islam's holiest book. Part 1. The Traditional Islamic View. In Islamic belief, the Quran is not written by Muhammad. Instead, it is the verbatim word of God, al-Kalam al-Ilahi, transmitted by the angel Gabriel, directly to Muhammad between 610 and 632 CE. Muslims believe Muhammad was illiterate, referred to as al-Ummi, meaning he could not have composed such a complex text on his own. The Quran itself claims divine origin, as seen in Surah 53:4. Nor does he speak from his own desire, it is but a revelation revealed. Early Muslim scholars like al-Tabari and Ibn Ishaq affirmed this view, emphasizing Muhammad's role as merely the conveyor, not the creator of the Quran. However, this view depends heavily on religious faith and tradition rather than empirical evidence. Part 2. The Muhammad as author hypothesis. Secular scholars have long questioned whether Muhammad might have been the actual author, or at least the primary composer of the Quran. Under this hypothesis, Muhammad, as a charismatic leader and spiritual visionary, may have authored the Quran in response to his religious experiences and the socio-political context of 7th century Arabia. Historian W. Montgomery Watt notes, "We must reckon with the probability that Muhammad, though sincere in his belief, did contribute something of his own thought to the material of the revelations." Muhammad more than likely encountered Christian monks, Jewish tribes, and various oral traditions during his travels as a merchant. Arabia was a religious crossroads, teeming with stories from the Bible, apocryphal Christian texts, and Gnostic influences. The Quran's supposed strong moral codes, its warnings of divine judgment, and emphasis on monotheism mirror Jewish prophetic literature. The structural and thematic similarities to biblical texts suggest familiarity, if not direct borrowing. Scholar John Wansbrough, a pioneer of revisionist Islamic studies, argued that the Quran is not a product of the lifetime of Muhammad, but a composite literary product developed over a longer time within a sectarian milieu. In this view, Muhammad may have started the movement, but the Quran was developed further by his followers. Part 3. Influence from Jewish and Christian sources. Many Quranic stories resemble Jewish midrashic literature, the Babylonian Talmud, and Syriac Christian teachings. For instance, the Quran's version of Abraham being cast into fire by Nimrod is not in the Bible, but it does appear in Jewish midrash. The story of Jesus speaking from the cradle in Surah 19. That's also not found in the canonical Gospels, but appears in apocryphal texts like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. Christoph Luxemburg, a controversial scholar, argues that many Quranic phrases were originally in Syriac Aramaic, not Arabic. He claims that misunderstanding these roots led to mistranslations in the standard Arabic text. For example, the famous promise of virgins in paradise may be a mistranslation of white raisins, a symbol of abundance in Syriac Christian literature. Luxemburg writes, "Many Quranic terms and expressions make more coherent sense when read through a Syriac Aramaic lens, rather than purely Arabic." Although many Muslim scholars reject Luxemburg's methods, his work sparked renewed interest in the Quran's potential linguistic borrowing. Part 4. The Multiple Authors Hypothesis. Scholars such as John Wansbrough, Patricia Crone, Gerd Puyn, and Christoph Luxemburg argue that the Quran was not authored by a single man at one point in time, but is instead a composite text, gradually compiled and redacted over several decades from a range of oral, written, and regional sources. Their research suggests that the Quran evolved within a complex historical and political context, shaped by diverse influences and edited to serve the needs of emerging Islamic authority. This theory gained momentum after the discovery of the Sana'a manuscripts in Yemen in 1972. These early Quranic fragments, dating to the 7th and 8th centuries, show significant textual variations, including words, verses, and structural differences not found in the standardized Quran today. Gerd R. Puyn, who studied the Sana'a fragments, stated, "The Quran claims for itself that it is clear, but if you look at it, you will notice that every fifth sentence or so simply doesn't make sense. This suggests the Quran is a composite work with textual evolution. The Quran's disjointed structure, sudden topic changes, and mixed grammatical forms in Arabic further support this theory. Michael Cook and Patricia Crone proposed that it drew on pre-Islamic poetry, Arab oral traditions, and regional religious ideas. In short, the Quran we know more than likely was shaped by many voices, not just one. Part 5. The Umayyad and Abbasid Redaction Theory. A final theory suggests that the Quran was edited and standardized during the early Islamic empires, notably under the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates. Islamic tradition itself acknowledges that the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan, ordered the burning of all alternative versions of the Quran around 650 CE to enforce a single standardized text. Historian Fred M. Donner explains, the earliest sources suggest a process of canonization and redaction that took place decades after Muhammad's death, raising questions about what was included or excluded. Moreover, the Abbasid dynasty, famous for its translation movements and theological debates, may have shaped Quranic interpretation to suit their political needs. Some believe certain verses were altered, emphasized, or interpreted in ways that strengthened the caliphate's religious legitimacy. For example, Surah 4:59, "Obey Allah, the Messenger, and those in authority among you," has been cited as a verse possibly crafted or emphasized to legitimize obedience to ruling elites during the Umayyad or Abbasid periods. Other verses, like Surah 16:103, appear defensive, possibly responding to accusations that Muhammad borrowed from non-Arabic sources, suggesting a later editorial context. The so-called stoning verse, reportedly lost when eaten by a sheep after Muhammad's death, is preserved only in hadith and points to omissions from the original Quranic corpus. The absence of the standard opening formula in Surah 9 raises questions about its completeness or original structure. Surah 5:3's declaration of the perfection of Islam is interpreted differently across sects and may have been politically framed to suit Sunni orthodoxy over Shia claims. Likewise, Surah 33:6 grants Muhammad's wives special status, potentially to cement the Prophet's household's role in early Islamic law and society. These examples, while contested, illustrate how later political, legal, or theological agendas may have influenced which verses were preserved, emphasized, or canonized. Tom Holland, author of In the Shadow of the Sword, writes, "The Quran was not a monolithic revelation dropped onto Muhammad, but a text shaped by political, tribal, and religious rivalries long after his death." The absence of archaeological or textual evidence for a complete Quran in the early decades after Muhammad's death further complicates the claim of perfect preservation. Conclusion: revelation or redaction. So, who really wrote the Quran? If you ask a devout Muslim, the answer is clear: God did, through Gabriel to Muhammad, without error, without change. But if you ask a historian, linguist, or critical scholar, the answer is far more complex. Evidence suggests that the Quran draws from earlier religious traditions, that its text evolved over time, and that political powers played a role in shaping the final version we have today. Muhammad may have been its spiritual source, but not necessarily its sole author. As scholar Ibn Warraq put it, the truth about the Quran lies hidden beneath layers of tradition, myth, and political history. To uncover it, one must be willing to ask uncomfortable questions. If you found this exploration thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. What do you think about the Quran's origins? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical.